for Matt, which we will collect and present at the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. That'll be a live Q&A with Matt. The chat button allows you to get messages to us. Please use all panelists so that we can all see them. It does not allow you to communicate with other attendees, however. But we will be able to see those messages if you have something urgent to tell us. And other than that, enjoy the webinar. I'd like to introduce Matt now. Excuse me. Let me do this.
All right.
Let's go back one and go do a poll. We will have some interactivity during the webinar. And the first poll is pretty simple. It's what's your current job role and how you are feeling today. So please select between the different job roles. We'll keep the poll open just for about a minute. And let us know, are you feeling happy and well today? Are you kind of in the middle or not so good today? We've been asking this question since the outbreak of the pandemic. Make sure that our attendees are coping well with social isolation, social distancing, and the other stresses. So the poll will stay open for about 30 more seconds. And please get your choices in and hit enter. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we see that pretty interesting mix of professionals and students. And thankfully, almost everybody is at least okay and mostly in the feeling well. So that's good news. So now I'd like to introduce Matt. And Matt Bailey is the president of SiteLogic, digital marketing instructor for the Direct Marketing Association in New York City, and instructor for OMCP, which is the Online Marketing Certified Professional Program. He's a faculty member here at Simplilearn in our digital marketing discipline, and he is the author of several books: Internet Marketing an Hour a Day, Wired to be Wowed, Teach Old Dogs New Tricks. We're very pleased to have him here today, and welcome, Matt.
All right. Thank you so much, Stuart. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and looking forward to sharing this. And here's the format. I'm going to share a little bit of, like we said, sort of the top things about SEO, things that are emerging that we should know about. But then when we include this, we get to what I think is the best part of the webinar, and that's your questions. I'd love to know your questions about SEO and what you can do to be better and more effective at it, as well as what are the changes that are coming and what can happen. I think there might be a little bit of interference on the line. I know I've heard it from others, and so we'll try and get through this the best we can. If it gets too bad, we might try a restart or something like that. Hopefully, we don't have to.
Just to let you know, just to let you know, Matt, I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. So let's get started here. Number one thing, more and more of Google's algorithm is moving towards what's called a user-centered evaluation. And that is, what are people doing on your website and how do they interact with your content? Now, I'm going to get into some more technical things that surround that and some measurements. But first and foremost, here's something you should be doing, and that is getting into your analytics, looking at your landing pages, especially your landing pages from organic search. Look for those landing pages that have a high bounce rate. And what I would tell you to do is actually in one screen, look and find those high bounce rate pages. Identify the page. And if you have two monitors, this is where they really come in handy. On your other monitor, actually go and look at that page. Now, this requires some analysis. If you can figure out why they landed on that page, what word, what keywords may have brought them there. Now, this will require that you get into your webmaster tools or even some of your search tools to find out what word that page was ranking for, and then figure out the intent. What did people want on this page? Now, sometimes just because it's a high bounce rate does not mean that it's a low quality page. It can be a very high quality page. Just for the information that people want, they can see it on the page within seconds, and it answers their question. And that is a successful visit. What we're looking for are high bounce rates that also reflect low time on site, little engagement, few pages viewed, and of course, lower conversion rates. This can be articles you have on the site, this can be other pages, but it always makes sense to take some time and evaluate your content and to see which content is underperforming or really not doing well when it attracts people to the site and keeping them engaged. Then evaluate what to do with it. Does the page need to be redesigned? Does the content need to be reformatted so that people can very quickly scan the page and figure out what they need? These are some of the ways that you can start evaluating the user experience on your website. And by improving the user experience, whether it's through design or content, or by removing the page altogether, which I think would be an extreme reaction, look to see how you can improve that engagement factor. Now, also, here's some of the things that we're going to be seeing in analytics if you haven't seen it already. Firefox users are being underreported in analytics, and that's because Firefox is blocking a lot of cookies. Some of that affects Google Analytics. Another way is that Google Analytics is extending the time period in order to attribute more traffic to Google search or Google ads. And now, directly opposite is Apple Safari, which is expiring all cookies after 7 days. All this is going to play havoc with unique visitors, total visitor sessions, and attribution of where people come from. Because Apple Safari, if someone comes to your site but then comes 2 or 3 weeks later, they're going to show up again as a new user, as well as the attribution may not follow because Safari has blocked those cookies. So with analytics, it's getting a little rocky when it comes to figuring out who is a new visitor, a returning visitor, as well as other browsers. They're all handling cookies differently. And Google Analytics is trying to get as much out of cookies and attribution as possible because they benefit. If they can show more attribution to search or ads, well, it makes them look better, and it means that people will focus more of their marketing budget on Google. So that's why analytics has been changing over the past year, and this is one of the reasons why you may be seeing differences in terms of attribution. One thing you may also want to look at is your browser report and see how people are acting differently in the browsers. Now, part of this page experience that we're looking at, Google is focusing more on what they call the user-centered experience and looking at search signals. That what are signals that can show that it's a good experience for users? Now, this was initially implemented in Mobilegeddon. If you remember that from a few years ago, where Google moved to a mobile-first index. And in doing so, they rewarded sites that were mobile-friendly, that removed interstitials that would intrude into the user experience. Also, when they looked at just HTTPS sites, that got a boost. But anything also that's safe. Now, safe covers a whole lot of things, and that could be content, that could be sites that aren't built properly, it could be sites that have been identified with malware. Safe covers a lot of things. Well, what is coming and is being implemented are now what's called the Core Web Vitals. And these measure 3 areas of interactivity and content and user experience. I'm going to walk through each one of these, but these are the new vitals that are being implemented, and so it's always good to measure this against your site. Now, I'm using the Chicago Tribune as an example here, and you can see when I run the Chicago Tribune against a Core Web Vitals check. Now, I've got the URL down there, but also if you're using Google Chrome, there is a plugin that you can employ from Google. It's called Core Web Vitals, and in that plugin, you can get this data as well. Now, what this is considered is this is a guidance for quality signals. And again, Google's all about quality in their index. And as we can see here, the Chicago Tribune does not pass the Core Web Vitals assessment. They failed in the 3 major areas of what's considered a good user experience. Now, I'll explain each one of these. The first one is what's called largest contentful paint or contentful paint. Depends on how you're going to say that. Now, what this is measuring is load speed. Now, if you're an SEO for any length of time, you know that load speed is critically important. And many webmasters and many businesses have reported improvements in rankings, improvements in performance, and improvements in sales with faster load times. Now, what's being measured here is the largest block of content. Now, this could be text, it can be some images, but it's the rendering time of the largest block of images or text on the page. Now, what prevents that? That can be a slow server. That can be if you have too much client-side JavaScript that's running and taking time and performing operations on the user's browser. It could also be third-party content or connections. If those are running slow, that will inhibit your page speed. And so largest contentful paint or contentful paint, basically what they're looking at is anything that is better than 2.5 seconds, that's considered good. And as you saw from the Tribune, that was much slower. So that's what we're trying to get as far as loading the first block of content that the user can see. The next measurement is what's called first input delay. This measures interactivity. This is the first element of the page that offers an interaction to the user. And it depends on how long it takes for that interaction to render on the page. Now, this can be anything from a search box to a clickable link, anything. And so what this is measuring is the user's perceived interaction. That means the moment that that page loads and the user can see a point of interaction. That is how long it is from the point they click on the link until they can input an interaction, till they can actually follow through with that. Now, again, the problem here typically is going to be JavaScript again. How you handle JavaScript is going to greatly affect the first contentful paint as well as the first input delay. And your target time here is less than 100 milliseconds. The third thing, and I think we've all experienced this, especially if you're using your mobile device, where you'll click on a link, you go to a page, and you start reading the article, and as soon as you get like a few words in, the whole thing shifts. And it shifts primarily because of ads. And what Google is going to measure is how much the content is shifting based on loading images, ads, and content, because that is considered a negative user experience. If it's ever happened to you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That I'm trying to read, and all of a sudden, the content shifts, moves. And instead, what I'm looking at is an ad, and I have to go find the content that I was reading. the more shifting that you have on that page, not only when it first loads, but ongoing while the content is there. And I've seen this numerous times on websites where the content keeps moving because maybe they're rotating ads and different ad sizes will cause a constant shift. The more shift you have, the poorer the performance will be, the poorer the user experience will be, and it will negatively affect your rankings. Now, some of the things you can do to fix this. Number one, if you have images on the page, define dimensions. Don't just put a percentage and let the user's browser figure it out and do all the movement. Add dimensions. Focus that down and get that right, and that will increase the speed. The biggest problem with most of this are ads. Ads and any embedded advertisements, iframes, anything that you're bringing from that third-party server, and especially ads that don't have defined dimensions. That's what's going to mess this up more than anything. Any dynamic content, any actions, again, where you're out for a third party, and sometimes web fonts, if they aren't formatted correctly or developed correctly, or if they're not loaded in. But the biggest problem is usually ads. And so if you're running ads on your site and you know there's some shifting going on, define the sizes, define the ad size, and those are some things that can help bring that under control. So that is a quick review of what those things are. I'll get to it a little bit later about where you can go to take that test. But before that, we're going to turn it over for poll number 2.
Thank you, Matt. And that last item you were talking about is one of my pet peeves with the internet when I hover over a box on a form and suddenly everything jumps and I'm not in that box anymore. So
yep. It also causes a lot of invalid ad clicks because when the content shift happens, typically what you see then are ads. And if you're on your mobile, you're going to scroll, but instead what you do is you actually click on an ad that just appeared, and then doing so you bounce at. And so it looks like an ad view. It looks like someone clicked, but in reality, it was a mistake.
Yep. And I sometimes think that that's on purpose. I suspect certain sites do that. This poll question has to do with our audience's current set of digital marketing skills, and what people use in their day-to-day jobs today. And we'll keep this open for another minute or so. And it's an interesting mix. I'm looking at the dynamic numbers coming in, and it's a fairly even mix, but there are a couple things that are standing out. So in about 30 seconds, we'll close the poll. Please do get your answers in and remember to hit enter. We'll close the poll in about 15 seconds. And closing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And as you can see, social media is the top skill people are using today. SEO and email marketing both rank highly, and there's, as I said, a broad mix across all the skill sets.
Wow, good.
So let's go on.
All right. Okay, what can you do? Now, like I said, there is, if you're using Chrome, there is a plugin that you can use for this. If you don't use Chrome, and we could talk about that as well. I prefer using the Google Developers site, and that's the Page Speed Insights. Now, the Page Speed Insights, that's going to give you the entire set of measurements there. It's going to give you everything you need, not just page speed. It will give you the cumulative layout shift. It will give you the first contentful grouping there. This website. So hopefully you can get this down here. I should have probably popped it in the chat there, but I'm sure you'll find it here. So that's where I will go and get that report. Now, a couple other things. Number one, whenever there is a new algorithm or when people start reporting, and this is one thing I have noticed, and actually I know a lot of the people that whenever there looks like there's going to be a new algorithm or there's changes, immediately they're reporting there's a new algorithm. Here's what's happening. Here's what's going. And it's this breathless reporting. But they will even admit in their articles, if you read them far down enough, they will admit they don't know what's happening. And in many times, in many of the past algorithm changes, Panda, Penguin, Hummingbird, any of those, it took months for people to fully understand what was being done in the algorithm. Google will announce some level of what they're doing, but it's usually very cryptic and it's not clear. However, it takes a few months, maybe even a few years to fully understand what's happening in an algorithm change. The result of this is my constant advice to anyone doing SEO. Please do not react to anyone who is talking about the latest algorithm change, what's happening with the index, and what it seems to be affecting. Do not react to it. The more you react to those things, the more trouble you're going to get in because you're not waiting to see what the full amount of data will show and reflect. Focus your time on the best practices. Don't chase algorithm changes. All right? If you're doing best practices, you rarely need to know anything about what the algorithm change will do. Algorithm changes are designed to filter out people that are trying to game the algorithm, people that are trying to create a false relevancy, people that are trying to buy backlinks in order to appear more relevant. Google's trying to get rid of those. They're also trying to get rid of poor or low quality content. And so if you're following best practices, writing great content, and you're getting visitors and they're engaging with you, you rarely, if ever, have to be concerned about an algorithm update. Okay? That's that. Because there's one coming, I've seen people report on it, but what got me is even when those reporting on it mentioned in their article, please don't react to it because we don't know fully what will happen, and it takes months to sometimes years. Now, also another warning. There was a great article published, I believe it was on Search Engine Journal, about understanding the math behind SEO studies or SEO analysis. I've got a lot of bullet points here. There are SEO studies that come out from SEO companies. The vast majority of SEO analysis or studies are being published by SEO companies that also sell software that happens to enable you to measure those studies. But here's the problem. The math that they are using, the data that they are using, and many times is very, very weak. And there's no statistical correlation to connect what the study was about and their proposition, the results. The correlation factors are so small. And what happens is what's called confirmation bias. That this is what I think is happening. And so when I measure this and I see a little bit of correlation, that's it. That's what it means. This absolutely happens. And we see a lot of this with bounce rate studies where people are saying if you have a high bounce rate, that's a ranking factor. High bounce rate is not a ranking factor for the very thing that I mentioned early on in this webinar. If I'm looking for a company's phone number or their address, and I search for that and I find it on their about page, it takes me 10 seconds to get it and I leave. That creates a high bounce rate. because all I was looking for was for that information. That is a successful visit. And that's why high bounce rate will never affect rankings. So we have very weak correlations. The evidence is usually very, very thin. And again, it follows the confirmation bias. This is what I think is happening. And so therefore, that's going to look more like it when I look at the evidence, when I look at the measurements. But here's another problem within the SEO industry. All these companies publish their research. None of the research is peer reviewed. None of it is evaluated or really shared by another third party to validate that research. The research is published by the company that happens to benefit if you buy their software. And so they have a vested interest in these studies being taken by people and then saying, well, I have to use this software because this software will mimic Google's algorithm. But that's based on largely guesswork. There is no, I'll just say this right now. No study can replicate the full Google algorithm. It's not possible. Because if you know anything about scientific method, if you know anything about performing a study based on data, you have to replicate all factors. You have to have a control group, and then you have to have a group that you're studying. When you're trying to re-engineer or unengineer or really go after the Google algorithm, what's your control group? You don't have a control group because the algorithm changes daily. It's impossible to have a control group, and it's impossible to have a study group in order to create something of enough statistical significance to draw a conclusion. So beware of SEO companies, and this has been happening more and more and more, where they've got their own formulas that decode Google. Don't fall for it. Look at the data, look at the analysis. They're good reading, but they're better sales material. And so watch out for that. All right. Now, there's been a couple of questions that we've gotten, and I wanted to kind of address a few of these before we hit into the Q&A. And actually taking a look at some of the Q&A, some of these questions are coming up here. So I will answer these, and then we'll get into the Q&A. Number one, are SEO services worth it? Absolutely. Absolutely. I evaluate hundreds of businesses a year, and I look at their analytics, and always their number one source of visits, their number one source, especially when we talk about attribution of sales, SEO. They come from search. So I'm amazed at how many people overlook this. And I know that a lot of you put social media was like one of your core marketing things. However, nothing brings in visitors and nothing brings in business like SEO. That is a core business function. SEO services are worth it. Now, let's talk about SEO. SEO, as it was 10 years ago, barely is recognizable to what it is today. SEO today is much more about content and working SEO into a full inbound marketing plan. And so we are SEOing articles. We are using SEO for videos in YouTube. We're applying SEO to email. We're applying SEO to our social posts. We're applying it in many different areas by implementing keywords. But what's most critical in SEO is excellent writing. Writing that answers people's questions. Writing information that people want to know. Those are the big things. Technical SEO, yes, still vitally important. However, for someone to specialize in that is becoming rarer and rarer. It has to be coupled with many other skills. And so it's coupling SEO with design, coupling SEO with copywriting, SEO with analytics. Those are how SEO jobs are now being published or being asked for. Being an SEO, all I do is look for keywords. That's old. That is almost an extinct job. Being an SEO and being able to work within an entire marketing department and understand analytics, copywriting, inbound marketing, content marketing, social media marketing, and implementing it all throughout the organization, that's the job that's in demand. SEO tools. Now I use SEO tools. However, as I kind of went into, I don't always subscribe to the measurements that are in SEO tools. As an example, I use Yoast for my WordPress blog, but I'm not always concerned when my title tags don't match up to Yoast's optimal. Because again, realize that a lot of the SEO tools, it's their own algorithm. It's their own method of measuring things. And a lot of times, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. I trust my gut more than I trust a lot of those tools and their feedback. It's the same way we do a lot of work also with accessibility. And so we'll use the W3C and we will run the site through the W3C. Now, there will always come back errors or areas of non-compliance, but I've never been concerned about 100% compliance in web accessibility because some of those things, it's a machine running a test against my code. That's what's happening. Same thing with SEO tools. It's an algorithm running against my code. There are still things as a human that when I evaluate it, I can see where, you know what, it's not vitally important we adhere to that standard of performance because we're trying to do something else. We've got another thing happening here. And so it's a judgment call to know when you need to adhere and when you don't. So SEO tools, I like them for the keyword research. I like them for the website management tools. I like them for the backlink checks. Those are the primary ways that I like it. But whenever they're giving me a measurement or, your SEO for this page is 70%, I don't pay too much attention to that. I just keep that in there. And so that these things should answer, will SEO exist in 5 years? I don't think it's going to right now. I don't think it depends on what type of SEO you're doing. As I said, if all you're doing is keyword research and saying these are our keywords that we need to optimize for, and once in a while you go in and you put keywords into title tags or a page or something like that, I don't think that's going to exist in 5 years. It needs to be integrated into so many other disciplines and a larger sense of marketing and how that applies. That's going to make you more valuable as a search engine optimizer, not just a limited skill set. The more skills you have in digital marketing and understanding how SEO applies in all those areas, that's what's going to make you valuable, and that's how SEO will exist. The final question is, how does SEO work for YouTube? And I did a webinar with Simplilearn a couple of months ago about that. And a lot of the same principles still apply. Your headline of the video, your description of the video. YouTube looks at video rankings very similar to Google because it's part of Google. And so they're going to look at the words you use in your headline, the words you use in your description. And also, you can upload, closed captioning in your video. And so the words that are being used in the video also helps with relevance. On the other side, YouTube absolutely looks at your performance. How many times, what's your click-through rate of when the video appears to people clicking and watching it? How long do they watch it? Do they watch the majority of the video, all of the video? They only watch 10 seconds of the video. Your performance is going to, in large part, be part of the SEO algorithm for YouTube. So I've answered a few of those questions, but like I said, let's get to your questions because I think that's the best part of the webinar. But before I do that, I've just talked about SEO. Stuart, I'll let you introduce this, but does this pique your interest in SEO at all?
Right. And we'll launch this poll. This is more or less the same question we just asked you, but with respect to what you want to know in the future. How do you want to improve your set of skills, and what tools do you want to add to your toolbox in digital marketing? And we asked this for a partially selfish reason because Simplilearn does offer training programs some of which Matt runs, and we can help you add those tools to your tool set and upskill yourself for your career. I'll keep the poll open for about another 30 seconds. And so far, it does look like SEO is a popular answer. And in about 10 seconds, we'll close so you have time. Just 5 seconds left to enter and hit submit. All right. I'll share the result in just a second. Here we go. So,
All right.
a lot of people would like to develop an overall skill set, and of the individual skills, SEO followed by social media are the most popular responses.
Yep. Good. Good. I think that's critical because, I think moving forward, as I've mentioned before, it's going to be an integrated skill set rather than an isolated skill set. Years ago, people were hiring SEOs, they were hiring social media specialists, and you had a lot of people doing little things. And now what I'm seeing is more and more integration. Employers are requiring that you are able to know all of these skills and be able to apply them. As I said, it makes you much more valuable as an employee. It makes you more reliable and being able to handle more work or more responsibility.
Okay. So I think now we can move on to the Q&A section.
Yeah. Let's look at Q&A. Like I said, this is the best part here. I'd love to hear the questions you've got. There's always a lot of questions from these webinars, and we wanted to make time today to answer, since we were talking about 10 things you need to know. I'm very curious about your questions.
We have one general question from Harshad. How do you prioritize your SEO activities?
Oh, wow. Good question. Wow. Boy, it depends on the project. If it's a client that I've been working on for, let's say years, then at that point I'm going into Google Analytics and I'm looking to troubleshoot. I'll look at low performing content. I'll look to see what pages are influencing people to move forward and convert, but also which pages people are not interacting with. So sometimes I'll go back and I'll clean out, like especially someone who's been blogging for years. Even myself, I've been blogging on my site since about 2006. I go back and look at some of those articles and I realize some of them are outdated. Some of them talk about issues that really aren't relevant anymore. And then I'll see that they're not getting a lot of traffic. And so I'll curate some of the content that I have, either by eliminating it or, maybe creating another page with some of that and kind of redirecting things. So for someone that's had a site for a long time or has been optimizing, then it's just what I've called the housekeeping. Now, if it's a brand new client, someone I'm just working with, I spend a lot of time focusing on keywords, and not just to find out the top, 20 keywords. What I want to know is I dig in to find the language, the words that are being used. So I will look for the top 1,000 or 2,000 keywords that are relevant to this business, or relevant to this industry, because I not only want to know the words that I can optimize for, I want to know what the audience wants. What information is important to their audience, to their buyers, to their prospects? What questions are they asking? So it's not a matter just of implementing words on the page. I want to be sure we're answering the right questions, that our content is also being understandable, that it's arranged the right way, that we're using headlines and subheadings, creating content on the page that can be scanned very quickly. I also want to make sure that we're engaging people, that we're not just writing articles. Maybe we have content that should be an image, that should be an infographic, that should be a presentation, that should be video. See, it's not always just text. It's what do people want to know, and how do we deliver that information to them in a way that makes sense? And then I apply those keywords and keyword concepts, not just on the website. I apply them in email. I apply them in social media because these are the words that people use. And I want to reflect that in our marketing, that my prospect uses these words and these phrases, and I'm going to use them as well. And I also use the keyword research to create a content calendar. I want to find what trends, when do people search for this content? Is there a specific time of the year that people search for it? And if I can find that, well, then that changes how I market. Now it changes how I interact people with on social media because I know it's more popular then. It means it tells me when my website content should be up and optimized prior to that trend. It also shows me in my email marketing. If I'm going to talk about this content, it should match the trend. And so all of my content marketing, my inbound marketing, it all flows from those types of things. And it really focuses around developing that engaging content. That's my priority when I'm doing SEO. I hope that answers the question. It was a big, long answer, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and it leads into a question from Paul about blogging. And are there any aspects of your answer that you would highlight, or any additional things you would use as tips for a newer blogger who's just getting started? His question is, should his focus be just on producing high quality content, or at what point should he start delving deeper into the SEO?
That is a great, great question. Honestly, so like I've been in SEO, like I said, I've been in SEO for 20 years. One thing that really kind of impressed me is when I will start working with a blogger. And one in particular, she was a mommy blogger, and she asked me to take a look at her analytics because she didn't know what was going on. And she found out what I did, and I said, yeah, sure. She was actually someone who went to my both of our kids went to school together. We met in the hallway, started talking, and I looked. She's getting a few million visitors to her site every month.
Nice.
A few million. And I started talking with her. She doesn't know the first thing about SEO. She doesn't know anything about analytics. However, she was a great writer. Fantastic writing. Now, this was a cooking website. And it wasn't one of those recipe websites, if you know what I'm talking about, the recipe websites where they have the life story and you have to scroll down to actually get to the recipe. No, right. She did not do that kind of stuff. She gave you the recipe, but she also wrote articles, and her articles were really good and they were engaging. And it amazed me how much traffic not only was she getting from Google, but from Pinterest. Pinterest was competing with Google for contributing visitors to her website. Some months she got more visitors from Pinterest than she did from Google. She's not a marketer. She's not an SEO. She's a great writer. And that is, so if you're starting out as a blogger, focus on your content. Write what you know to write, what people want. And the basics of SEO are use a keyword in the title, break up the content with subheadings, bullet points, make it easy for people to scan the content. And the easier you make it, you're also doing things that are naturally good SEO. You're using HTML markup. You're breaking up large content blocks. All those things are good SEO. And if you're on a platform like WordPress, a lot of the SEO is really kind of handled if you put in a few plugins and do that kind of thing. And there's not a lot you need to worry about. Now, there are like more and more. Google is implementing more and more technical things, and I can't stand that because it raises the bar of what you need to know. but just starting out, focus on just creating great writing that people want to read, and you'll find you'll be rewarded for that.
Are there resources you could point Paul to other than articles on Simplilearn's website regarding SEO? Are there other resources for SEO for the new blogger?
There's a lot of websites out there. And there's the typical search engine watch, search engine journal. You get some good content from them. Be wary of it though, because they are two of those things that, whatever's popular and whenever there's an algorithm change, the sky is falling. They are very distracted by shiny objects. Honestly, I'll tell you, two of the best places I love to read their articles, MailChimp. MailChimp, yeah, they're an email service, but they write great articles about marketing and developing content, and not just for email. MailChimp is a phenomenal resource. I always suggest it. And then I use Word Tracker for keyword research, and Word Tracker puts out some really good articles about SEO and about marketing altogether. So, and those are two things. You don't have to be a user of the service. You can get that content. So if you're evaluating a site, avoid the hype and find people that just give good, solid, best practices advice. Don't fall for the flashy. Look for great non-hyped advice. And we can I think Simplilearn, if you're going through the content on there, I know not just myself but other trainers as well, we'll put some resources and things that you can read in our courses.
Great. This is something that you addressed in your SEO questions, but can I ask if you want to elaborate? Sarah asks if there are ways to incorporate archived blogs and improve your website's SEO. Are there things you do? Because you had mentioned curating the site. Are there things things you do to old blogs to improve SEO?
I'll tell you what, the number one thing is look for broken links. That is something I have found I have to do almost monthly. When you've got a website that's over 5 years old, if you've been blogging, chances are you've been linking out to other sites. I'm amazed at how many sites don't exist that I have linked to in the past how many years. And so running that broken link checker, that's probably the number one thing you can do with a blog, because those broken links will count against your SEO. So that's one way to curate your content. Look for what's outdated and just, if it's not attracting anything. Or I even found some of the articles that I have, yeah, they were getting some traffic, but you know what? They were just reading that page and they weren't really doing anything else. And I never tracked any engagement much beyond that page. So I had to make a decision. Is this really what I want to keep here or not? And then just, do a redirect on the traffic. That's part of it. But the broken links are probably the biggest thing you'll run into on an archived blog.
Okay. There are some technical questions. Romaine asks if you think another AdWords overhaul is going to affect filtering out responsive ads based on device screen sizes and ad space.
I'll tell you what you'll see with AdWords. What's going to happen is whatever makes Google the most money. If responsive ads aren't making Google money compared to the regular ads, then the regular ads will be shown. Whatever Google decides to do is best for Google when it comes to ads, because those ads are 90% of their revenue, and so they don't mess around with that. Any changes are designed fully to increase revenue.
Okay. Nathan asks couple of questions regarding security. First, if you think HTTPS is truly secure, and second, if you think dimensionless ads pose a threat, an opening, a loophole for network security.
The whole HTTPS, I mean, you'll find varying opinions on that. I didn't like it when Google implemented it as a means of eliminating keywords. So from an organic standpoint, I can't see the keywords that people use in Google to find my site. I thought that was kind of a smooth move on their part to eliminate that. So I'm not a huge fan of it, and I honestly I'm not enough on that technical side to let you know. I do have my suspicions about it. But just simply a site being HTTPS doesn't always mean that it's safe. On the other side, I firmly am again. Anything dimensionless is going to wreak havoc with your page. It takes longer to load because it has to process the image and resize it within the browser. So that's going to take time and resources, especially if you have dimensionless ads. That could be an injection point. That could be really it causes more shift because then whatever ad and ad size populates that. If you're running ads on your site, you need to control those dimensions as closely as possible and define them in the code, and the ad must conform to that. Otherwise, yes, you're going to get those shifting problems, anything to optimize any technical always revolves around defining the image sizes.
We have a question from Annie, who is a student in our Digital Master's Certificate program, and she's taking
Oh, great.
She's taking the PPC course. What's the best way or the best course or study material to better understand Google Ads as a practitioner, and especially with respect to the reporting and analytics?
Well, if you are enrolled in Simplilearn's paid search with Brad, I can't say enough about Brad Geddes and his training. You are getting it from the very best. I consider myself a fairly good paid search trainer, but I love what Brad does, and he's been doing it for years, and you can't get better than that. So other than that, I would recommend if you're taking courses with him, get his book, get some of his worksheets, do the extra work because that will help you. And really, a lot of paid search is experience. And so the more you work in it, the more you do it, the more you evaluate it, that's what's going to help you.
And we do have a webinar coming up with Brad next month.
Oh, there we go.
I'm going to take a quick look to see what the date of that is. He is scheduled to do a webinar with us on November 5th. 20 things you need to know about PPC. So keep an eye out for that, Annie. And
I'm sure probably there's one in the archive about analytics from paid search. I am absolutely sure there is.
And let's see what else on the question list here. Questions about backlinks.
Mm-hmm.
Do backlinks from Facebook, YouTube, and so forth weigh into the rankings?
Not much, because they're usually no followed links. Most links from social services are no followed, which means that they do not, according to Google, if it's a no follow, it does not pass page rank or anything there. So I think from those sites, it doesn't carry a lot. Now, so comparatively, I think they provide very little as far as backlink benefits.
And a related question from Suresh is, how do you evaluate a backlink? How can you tell if it's a good or bad link?
Well, that's where I like the SEO tools. The SEO tools, when it comes to evaluating backlinks, I like those because they do look at the type of site. They do look at the reputation of these sites, and they show you how many links you're getting from those sites. So that analysis from SEO tools, I love that because I can also run it on a competitor's website and see what links they have. So those are some of the big reasons that I love using some of those SEO tools.
Slightly related question. You had earlier talked about W3C for evaluating usability. Can you tell us what W3C is?
W3C is the World Wide Web Consortium. And what that is agreed upon standard for accessibility. And that means accessibility for people who use screen readers, people that use text to speech, people that may have disabilities in using the web. I really am concerned about accessibility. I've been in it for years, and a lot of it is because of members of my family have needed the the um, the assistance in order to use the internet, not being able to see or have, think about the even physical limitations. Think about if you lost the control of your hand and fingers, how will you use a mouse? Touchpads can't always do it, especially if you have spasms or something like that. So assistive technology relies on accessibility. And here's the cool thing. The more accessible your site is to assistive technology, the more open and available it is to crawlers like Google, like Bing. So getting a good crawl of your code and content means that it's accessible. So looking at the accessibility of your site, that has a lot to do with also being very compliant when it comes to SEO. So that's the World Wide Web Consortium. I would recommend taking a look at it. And it's w3c.org. Highly, highly recommend just evaluating it, looking at some of the points there. It may cause you to think of some things that you haven't thought of, like people who are colorblind and how they distinguish between colors. And so there's a level of contrast in your content and images and background that can help people read better. So it's things like that that you may not consider, but this will help you think about it. But overall, it makes your site better for SEO.
Great.
Great.
Harshad has a question. Does SEO for the main site of a business differ from the SEO for the blog? And if there's a difference, is there a way to interconnect the two?
So I have my blog on a subdirectory. I know some businesses will have their blog on a subdomain, so it looks like it's a completely different site, but it's on the domain. It depends on how you've got that connected. I always like the blog kind of to be part of the main site, like a subdirectory. That's just, there are exceptions to that. It's not a rule. But I treat the blog very similar to a web page. The only thing is on my blog, and typically it'll be an article, is don't forget to put related articles. Don't forget to put a progression of, now that someone read this, where do you want them to go? What should they do? How are you going to engage them and pull them deeper into the site? I find a lot of blogs, they just put the article up there, but there's nowhere to go after you've read the article. So related articles, related content, related products, integrate your blog with your site, and think about the progression that after they read this information, what should they do or what do they need to know next? And so get those conversion points on the pages, get those integration points so that people can engage and move through and have that seamless experience.
Excellent. I have a question here about skills for an SEO expert. Tunde asks, is it necessary for an SEO expert to have a handful of graphic design skill? Is that a useful thing or an unrelated skill?
Oh, I think it's absolutely helpful, if not essential, to have just some basic graphic design skills. Understanding color, contrast, typeface, and how they play into how people read. I would highly recommend Jacob Nielsen's. I think it's Use It. They do a lot of studies in eye tracking, They do a lot of things in user experience. And a lot of that is the placement of text alongside graphics or utilizing design techniques within content. So I think it's a great skill to have alongside SEO because it's not just the content, it's understanding how to present the content. And that can mean a difference of just if you understand the content and SEO, you get some rankings. If you understand the design and presentation of content, it'll improve your conversion, which translates into better business. So that's why I like it when SEOs are looking at how to develop more skills beyond just words, but presentation, sales, conversion, those types of things, because those have a direct impact on the success of a business.
Excellent. Richard has a question relating to YouTube, and I know we did our webinar with you, as you said a couple months ago, regarding search optimization for YouTube. His specific question is, since YouTube makes captions, should people be conscious of using keywords in the video content itself? And again, the same types of things with search terms that you use in your blog. Would you use those in video content and other content?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where if you're scripting your videos prior to recording them, that helps you think about what you're going to say and and how it's going to be presented. Now, you don't want to just mindlessly repeat keywords. You want to use a natural context and a layering of related words and synonyms and things like that. And so that's why I like scripting videos prior to recording. And then, I use a teleprompter when I do things so that if I'm on video, I know what I'm saying. Sometimes I'll do stuff off the cuff. But if I've got a script, then all I have to do is upload it when I upload the video, and I automatically have my subtitles in place. And so, yeah, those are absolutely essential for YouTube SEO. Little part, but it helps.
Call back to something you said earlier, which had to do with evaluating whether a bounce rate is good or bad. For good performance, Nathan asked, for good performance, should the bounce rate be high or low?
It depends on the performance you're looking for. Like I said, I'll give you a great example. This was a website that, they made a sugar substitute, and they were concerned that their bounce rate their average bounce rate for the entire site was over 95%. Well, what caused it is that the vast majority of visitors to the site visited one page and it had a 100% bounce rate. That 100% bounce rate page was a conversion table where people were wanting to know how much of this sugar substitute do I use in place of sugar when I'm cooking. So here's the question. Did they get their question answered? Absolutely they did. Did they have any need to stay on the site and do anything else? No, they didn't. So a 100% bounce rate, but when you look at the context was they wanted the conversion. That's the page that ranked well. That's the page they landed on. It answered their question and they left. Successful visit. That's where 100% bounce rate is absolutely great.
And that also built goodwill from the customers because they got the answer quickly in and out and weren't interfered with extraneous content or questions or ads or that type of thing.
That is a great user experience, but always, if you're looking at bounce rate, look at it in context. What do people want? What do they see? And what are they doing? But it also should line up with what are they doing beyond? And you'll see it in time on site, pages viewed, conversion rates, types of things like that. It's not something that should just be viewed and, high, low means it's good or bad. It's not that simple.
Excellent. Last couple of questions. One is, how do you think artificial intelligence will impact SEO?
I think it's coming. Google is reducing the amount of keywords that are visible, and I think, right now in paid search, a lot of people are saying 20% to 20, almost 30% of their keywords are not visible, that Google is hiding them. I can't stand that. I think that's terrible. But what it's doing is forcing a reliance on Google's AI to determine which keywords are more relevant. And then I, as an advertiser, when I bid on these words, I can't see the results.
Mm.
So Google is forcing the AI issue. The thing is, I don't think AI is there yet because in some cases, determining intent through AI is going to be very good. In a lot of cases, determining intent from words is very bad. Right now, that's the state. It could get better. They're designing systems. That's what BERT is all about. It is trying to determine that. Right now, I don't think it's ready for prime time for the majority of words and content. It's coming. It's developing, and as long as Google is number one in the industry, we're going to have to deal with what they do.
Okay. And our last question today from Sumant. I hope this has an obvious answer. What is the best place to learn digital marketing?
Well, you can enroll in Simplilearn and start getting a good overview of all the digital marketing disciplines there.
Excellent. Okay. Brad, sorry, you mentioned Brad. I'm thinking about Brad. Matt, thank you so much. This has been an excellent session. How can people keep in touch with you?
There's a number of ways. Number one, I am very active on LinkedIn. That is my social network of choice. However, I'm starting a new YouTube channel as well, and I'm starting to put some content up there. I've got some basic analytics training, and we'll be uploading some new videos here soon. And then also, I run a podcast called The Endless Coffee Cup. That's on most of your podcast networks. It's also on my website as well, where I talk about digital marketing and its impact on culture. So a couple ways you can get in touch with me, and the website is SiteLogic.com.
Yeah, I like the name of your podcast because I try to keep my coffee intake fairly constant throughout the day.
That's one thing from working from home with this pandemic. My coffee consumption has gone crazy. So,
Good. All right, thank you. And you can also keep in touch with Simplilearn, but we would like to invite you to our next webinar, which I think is on the next slide, Matt. 1 week from today, we will have a panel discussion with Dr. Paras Arora of Microsoft and Somak Shome of IBM. It will be on the topic of how to build a successful cyber security career today. So if you are interested in that topic, or if you know folks who are, please look for that invitation and refer any of your friends who are in that field or want to explore that field. And again, you can keep in touch with Simplilearn. Our information's on the next slide. For the different social media networks, we are on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And we invite you to connect with us. One quick answer to a commonly asked question: we will be sending folks who have gotten this far with us today a proof of attendance certificate by email. It will take a couple of days for us to get those together and out to you. But you will also receive tomorrow a link to this webinar recording that you can review or share with friends. And we thank you all for being here today. We thank Matt again for a very informative and entertaining presentation. And we look forward to seeing you all at future Simplilearn webinars. So thank you and goodbye.